Hi, I'm Barry McDonough and I'm with BMD Publishing, and we're here today in the iconic offices in South Point, and we're interviewing today Anthony Quigley from Code Institute. Anthony, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Barry. Really delighted to be here to have a chat about e-commerce and its impact on the world.
Your current company, Code Institute, is very focused on online education.
Correct.
Can you tell us why you started the company and why you're so interested, why you're so passionate about online education?
So, I suppose I'm interested and passionate about education, and that's the point. Online is a new phenomenon in education, and it allows education to go beyond the boundaries of the classroom, and that's the really exciting part about this. So you're right, my current company is Code Institute. I had a company beforehand, we exited that company, and we were in the education space as well. So Code Institute, as the name suggests, is all about helping people get into the world of coding, software development. So why that? Why software development? Well, there's a number of reasons. One is people love coding. So there's a huge demand for coders at the moment. There's a skills shortage, by the way, and that's a kind of byproduct of the explosion in tech and the explosion in tech companies. And if you look around here, you know, whether it's the cameras or the air conditioning or whatever in this iconic offices, everything is being driven by code, by some kind of software. So there's a huge demand, and in fact there's a massive skills gap. So there's a demand up here and there's a supply down here. The universities, colleges, traditional educationists cannot supply fast enough. So I looked at this market and I said, well, hold on a second, is there a better way of helping people get into this space? And we've actually cracked that nut. Well, we're on the way to certainly cracking that nut, which is we take people who don't know anything about coding, have a desire to be in the coding space, kind of look at Facebook and Google and say, hey, I could do that. Or maybe they're just a startup, or maybe they're just going to want to go and learn coding and get a job. And we can, in the course of 3 months, move them from zero to hero. And we have tons of examples of those kind of people. And they're from making sandwiches to being admin people, all the way through to now they can get a job, and we help them get a job. So for us, success is that our graduates get a job. Anyone can move through, or maybe start and fall off, which is I'm sure we're going to discuss later. But what we want to do is make sure the people who start have the desire to finish, have the ambition to finish, have the willingness. We can help them, we can step them through, and then we can help them get that job at the end of it. And that's real success as far as we're concerned.
So the desire, the ambition, these are key elements for doing an online course, isn't it? To ensure that a person will start and finish. There's a filtering process, isn't it, that you have in Code Institute. How does that work?
Well, we're now into, I suppose, 10 or 15 years of online education. So what happened was there was a thing called MOOC, which was a massive online open courseware. So the likes of Udemy, Udacity, Coursera, they're big education supermarkets. So if you want to learn about knitting, $10 you can learn about knitting. If you want to learn how to be a barista, $50 and you can learn how to be a barista. The problem with that is because the value that is placed upon each of one of these courses is so low, and the entry filters, the entry criteria are none. It's a heartbeat and $50. The problem is people will make easy decisions. With a course like ours, it's very intense. It's 600 hours. It's 3 months full time. Like this is 9 to 5, and most of them work 9 till 9. Coding, building projects, and so on. So what we don't want is we don't want to start somebody off and then have them fall away. So what we do is we put in very strict criteria. And I don't mean, you have to come from a certain place and you have to look a certain way and so on. What you have to have is we interview people. We put them through some tests. We have something called the 5-day coding challenge, which is they have to actually go through, learn HTML, learn CSS, and I won't get into the technical details, but at the end they'll have built a website. And if they have the desire to get through that, that's a trigger. That's a pointer to say, well, these people are going to get through. We then interview them and talk to them about their desires and what they want for a future life and what career they want. And if it all makes sense, then we'll start them off. and off they go. And then what we do is we have a team of technical support, we have a team of psychological support, shall we say, to help people through, and also to technically support them as they go. We have a series of mentors around the globe. We have about 40 or 50 mentors around the globe who then support those students technically. Actually, one of the big things we're finding is that the students themselves, and this is the beauty, one of the beauties of online. There's many, many, many reasons you would go online as opposed to the classroom. One of them is we now have around about 1,000 students at any one time going through the system. So you can be sure that if you're starting off and you've got a question and you ask the question, and we use tools to allow people to network and be part of a community. And if you ask a question, usually a student gets back before we do. So we guarantee we'll get back within a certain time frame, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. But if somebody asks a question, you'll find that a student will come along and say, you know what, I fixed that one, I sorted that one, and here's the answer. Or here's how you go about it. What even students realize that actually in coding, it's the ability to understand and solve problems as opposed to how to, like anyone can look up Google. So coding is becoming very interesting in that, how do you get the button to be blue as opposed to white? Or how do you get the button to have a line around it as opposed to have no line around it? You can Google that. That's easy. It's actually, how do I now encourage the user to think about getting them to click on that button? Is it a blue button or is it a red button? And which one? Should it be at the top right or the top left or the bottom left? And, it's those interesting conundrums and puzzles that we try and encourage students to think about and to solve.
I can really see the value in certain subjects being taught fully online, coding, accountancy. There's many different subjects that are very suited to online. And then there's other subjects that obviously aren't, and there maybe a blended approach is better. But so what do you see happening in the future? Do you see this going in that you'll have subjects like the coding all fully online and more employers will just look for those type of qualifications, people doing those courses, or what do you imagine happening?
So, no, you're right, because online education is about 10 or 15 years old, as I said. The technologies are improving. So in order to answer the question, let's go back 10 years and have a look at what was online education then? What did it look like? And it looked like a series of PowerPoints with a voiceover. And there are some companies still doing that, by the way. But technology has moved on massively. So now what you've got is you've got a mix of video, you've got quizzes, you've got online samples, you've got mentoring, you've got the ability to blend in whether it's summer schools or some kind of practicality. And yes, you're right. So there are some sectors that are more prone and they can take advantage of online, and things like as you say, accountancy and things that require physical. So the question really is, how does a barista, for instance, you can learn the basics of learning a coffee, or learning how to make a coffee, but can you really get qualified without actually pouring the hot milk and making the hot milk fluffy or whatever you do? And that's going to be a challenge. So now let's look forward. And the technologies are improving dramatically. So is there some way AR or augmented reality or virtual reality can add to that experience? And I was talking to somebody just recently about they have a demo now of you walking into a classroom and you're actually physically but virtually sitting beside somebody and you can have a chat with them and you're looking at a lecturer. So it's now starting to look like a classroom and feel like a classroom. And the challenge that my program director always says is how do you get that sound of the chair pulling up beside somebody so that they're asking a question? But technologies are definitely improving. There's mentorship. It's easy to connect with people around the globe when there's a problem. So I think you're right. It's not as though suddenly schools are going to go online. And we had this debate around iPads. iPads and what do you call the generic name for iPads? Whatever it's called. They were going to revolutionize tablets. Yeah. They were going to revolutionize the way secondary school was done. It hasn't changed at all. It hasn't done it at all, because you know what? Teachers like to physically get down on their knees and look at what the little Jimmy is doing, and they're helping each other in the classroom. So that's not going to change. But in the professional space, where people are either working at the moment or looking for a new job, and they're in their 20s and they're in their 30s, then online education can certainly help a huge amount.
Yeah, and of course then we've got the developing world and how that's going to be so advantageous to them. The cost of education is going to plummet. It's going to be wonderful.
Just absolutely, but just think about the developing world. So in places around the globe where they just did not have access to education, all you need is a tablet or a PC or a phone, and now you've access to all this wealth of education. Now, it may not be to the same level as you and I or other people in the Western world would expect, but it's an education, and what we're doing is we're raising the bar. We're pulling people up by their bootstraps. We're changing the families, we're changing communities, and we're changing countries as a result of this.
So you've been a veteran of the online scene here in Ireland for maybe 30 plus years?
A long time.
I mean, you've been involved in lots of different companies, in lots of different spaces. So if we were to talk about e-commerce, first of all, what's your opinion of e-commerce in Ireland? How do you view that landscape currently?
Okay, so let me go back and answer the first part of that question, which was in 1995, I worked for a company called Microsoft. And Microsoft was launching a product called Windows 95, which turned out to be a pretty awful product in the end, but it was grand and made a huge number of sales. We launched that product in Simmons Court in Dublin, and a guy called Bill Gates came over and presented. And he presented on the future. And one of those things was things like the wallet. Now, he talked about mobile phones and telecoms and so on and so forth, but the wallet and e-commerce, people would be able to buy using a phone, and I was smitten. I was absolutely delighted to hear this. Shortly afterwards, by the way, I left Microsoft and said, okay, the world of e-commerce and online is where I'm going to put my career, place my career. So, how are we doing in Ireland? I think we're probably doing better than some and not as well as others. I think we're less inclined to embrace. SMEs, unfortunately, are less inclined still. And if you look at it's called the Digital Index by the Irish, i.e. Domain Registry, you'll find that there's a huge number of SMEs who are simply not just embracing fully. Now, it's probably because it's all happening very, very fast. It's very confusing. If you have no idea there's a difference between Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and you don't have a website, then it's really confusing. And so where are we in Ireland? I think we're doing quite well. We could do a lot better. I think we're fearful, and we're a fearful country in that I know people who are still fearful of putting their credit card online. And yes, there's the odd hack, and people will lose or their information, or their information will be gained somehow. But in general, it's getting much, much better, and there's very little fear. Like if you look now, how do we book airlines? How do we book hotels? How do we go? I just went away to Spain for a few days, and I didn't talk to anyone apart from somebody. I didn't talk to anyone. I just did everything online. So it's getting so much easier to do business and to do personal things online. So the state of e-commerce, I think, is really positive globally, and I think Ireland is there or thereabouts.
So with the wealth of experience that you do have, and there's going to be people watching who are starting companies, or maybe in a company that's struggling a bit, what advice would you have, maybe from lessons you've learned, maybe things that didn't go right? Is there anything you could share along those lines?
Make decisions is the one thing I've learned along the way. Just make decisions. It doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong. Of course it matters in the long term, but you might make a decision and you go, okay, well that's wrong, but you've made a second decision to say, that was wrong, let's move on. And I do that now all the time. So I might make, 100 decisions a day on different things, and we might say, okay, that's not right, let's go this way. So one of the decisions I made in a previous company, in Digital Marketing Institute, was we were a classroom-based company, and we kind of stumbled into the online space, and then we realized actually this is really good and this is positive and it's bringing our education to further afield. And one day, myself and my business partner at the time, Ian, we walked in and we said, that's it, classroom's finished. And we just cut classroom from, that was straight after Christmas actually, it was the 2nd or 3rd of January, and we said from March we're finished in the classroom. No more classroom, we're dumping that altogether. And we were at that stage in Dublin, in Belfast, Cork, London, Manchester.
And why was that?
Because we saw our future, and our future was not in classroom. And in fact, you cannot scale a classroom business. And in fact, here's an interesting anecdote. In the coding space, so we're in what's called a coding boot camp. It's a short, very intense, 3-month to 4-month long process of educating somebody into becoming a software developer. So the original of that species was a company called Dev Bootcamp. And Dev Bootcamp, and I looked at Dev Bootcamp and I said, that's a really good model, I like that model, but I'm going to do it online. Dev Bootcamp are now gone bust, 4 years in. And the reason they didn't survive is they started in San Francisco, went to Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, in the classroom. Now, the classroom can be very profitable for some companies. For universities, it's hugely profitable. For some private companies, it's hugely profitable, but it's not a scaling model. And I'm interested in how many people can we educate? I'd like to educate everybody who wants to be educated in coding, but I won't be able to do that if they have to fly to Dublin or if they have to fly to a venue. That's a real problem. So the scaling business, classroom versus online, is a massive attractor for me.
Yeah. You were talking about the e-wallet there and, experiences of online shopping. Do you think that retail is going to have to change in a massive way very, very quickly, or how do you imagine that playing out over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
It's interesting because I thought retail had changed massively. In fact, I have a 19-year-old son. He doesn't really go into shops, but he knows exactly where to buy everything online. That's the future. And he's 19. He's never been a browser of shops. He goes into Brown Thomas and he goes into whatever, some of the River Island or the big brands, he goes into those in town. But to be honest, when he's going to buy, he rarely buys in shops. And he knows how to buy and to return and to make decisions online. And so I think that's the future of retail. And if you think about it, look at what IKEA are doing. IKEA, if you want to buy a kitchen, you go online, they give you the software, there's the software online, and they say, well, what size is your kitchen? So you get out to take measure and you measure your kitchen. Okay, what would you like? Would you like a washing machine? Would you like a sink? Would you like cupboards? Would you like drawers? And where would you like them? Place them here, place them there. And it's point and click, and you build your kitchen online. Then it says print. You print, or maybe not, and you take it to IKEA, and you say, I'd like that kitchen, please. Isn't that that's fascinating? Forget this, Jimmy the carpenter coming along and measuring up, and you wouldn't want the sink there, love, and so on. But that's very colloquial. But IKEA now do this on a global level, and that's what we have to get used to.
Yeah.
And it's actually younger people, and because that's the nature of it. But younger people just embracing this. They've no concept of, like my kids, I have 17 and 19-year-old, they don't watch television. They just think it's bizarre that you would watch a television. They watch a screen, they watch lots of screens, they'll watch 3 screens at the same time, but they'll watch Netflix and they'll be playing Minecraft or they'll be playing Fortnite or whatever it is, all at the and they'll be on the phone to their friends all at the same time. And they have no concept that there's the 9 o'clock news. Why would you do that? The news is on Facebook or on Instagram, and that's where I get my news. So.
And what do you think then, as an entrepreneur and a business owner, with all this speed of change of everything happening so fast, how are you kind of future-proofing your own business? How are you planning for the change that you see happening, for example, in the online education space and other areas?
How am I making myself relevant, really, is the question. And I revert back to the question I answered earlier, which is make decisions. and you sometimes have to abandon what you've done. Very, very often. Look at Apple. Apple eats its own past, and it reinvents itself over and over again. And I have to do that. And I have to look at what's going on in education, and I have to understand what changes are coming along. But also, the main thing that I do is make decisions and hire amazing people. The people who work for me are much cleverer than I am, and much cleverer than I will ever be. And if you can surround yourself with people who are making amazing decisions all the time, then you have no problem whatsoever. I don't spend my time looking at the competition and worrying about the competition. There's always going to be a competition. There's competition for you. There's competition for the cameramen who are recording us today. There's competition for everybody. There's competition for these iconic offices here. So don't worry about the competition. Have a goal. 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Just have a goal and go after that goal, because everything else is in many respects irrelevant.
Well, Anthony Quigley, on behalf of the E-commerce Association of Ireland, thank you for sharing your insights.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for inviting me.